Hi, welcome to the next episode of Panachecast. Pete and I are here at the headquarters of Orbital Witness. We've got Ed Boulle with us. We're hoping to bring to you several episodes with LegalTech startups, and we have now our first one, which is great. Pete and I, we first saw Ed present at the Legal Geek conference. I think it was 2017. He had one of the most. It was quite a while ago. It was certainly the most memorable presentation I've seen. I won't go into the detail of what was in it, but it was great, and you obviously remembered it. You obviously did it well, and researched what would stick in people's minds. So, welcome to the show, Ed. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Pete, thanks for having me on the show. It's a real privilege to be the first legal tech startup on the show.
Yeah,
it's an honour, really, isn't it? Hopefully not the last.
Absolutely. Well, you guys have got an interesting background, which is not necessarily connected with what you're doing now. So tell us a bit about you personally before we get into what Orbital Witness does.
Yeah, we've come at LegalTech from a rather unusual angle. Most about we, I mean myself and my co-founder Will. So by background, yes, I'm a lawyer. I qualified as a barrister. Will himself was an economist, but we worked in the space industry. So I used to be a legal advisor for the European Space Agency on this rarefied area of law called space law. Will was an economist working in the space industry. We both ended up working with startups. Okay. And got very excited about satellite applications. This is almost kind of if you like, almost the genesis of Orbital Witness in a very early sense. So we had an idea back in the very early days, which was we wondered if we could use property data, principally planning information and satellite imagery, to see if people had been out there building stuff without planning information.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how Orbital Witness kind of got its name. The product is really not that at all anymore. In classic startup fashion, we went down one path, chose a name, and then quite a long time ago had a major pivot.
There's always that nub of the idea, and when you start exploring it, it's like, actually we could go down this route as well.
It's simple. True to form, we kind of went through an incubator program and found out that actually there weren't that many examples of the kind of the castle covered in hay bales that you'll know what I'm referring to. To build a big scalable tech business around. But we kept the name and we learned what the kind of true opportunity was for us to go after.
Which in a nutshell is very, very slow property transactions and finding a way of making those things go a little bit faster. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely one way of putting it. What we really see the big opportunity as being is to be able to provide an instant risk profile for any property transaction, be it commercial or eventually residential as well. The problem in as it stands in the world today is that if you want to understand a property, you have to go through a lengthy and kind of complex and potentially drawn out due diligence process. So there's no really good information available for you on day one. And that's true whether you are an individual buying a home or whether you are an investment fund investing in portfolios of properties. So, Orbital Witness is building an instant legal risk profile for a property transaction. We want to become the kind of Experian, but credit score bit of land and property.
Okay, interesting. I mean, I've said to you before about property as an asset class is lagging some way behind stocks and shares and bonds and so on, where you can click on a page, Hargreaves Lansdown or Yahoo or Google Finance, and find out a lot of information in one place instantly. And I guess that's to a degree what you're replicating essentially is relevant information about something so that someone can look at it, and I'm not sure what your risk profile does as such, but provide information so that at least they've got quick and easy access to what matters to them.
Yeah, so broadly, when we talk about a risk profile, we mean two things in two handfuls. One is aggregating information about a property. And the world has moved to a place where that's now increasingly becoming possible. So the movement of kind of paper-based information to digital form. And just the availability of technology to scoop all these things together. And the second is applying a layer of analytics. And this is one of, if you like, that's that second piece that's really Orbital Witness's true nature.
Okay.
So to be able to take raw information about a property and filter that down to what's relevant, what constitutes a profile for a given type of transaction. So what we're doing is building this platform of already hundreds and hundreds of the world's best real estate lawyers using Orbital Witness. And through the process of them using Orbital Witness, they're training the system to be able to deliver back both to them and ultimately to other sectors an instant profile for a property transaction. transaction.
Yeah.
I was going to ask because the data that makes up a profile of a property, all this information, I'm assuming that when you started down this route, that data was not easily accessible anywhere. There's stuff at the land registry, there's stuff at councils and things like that. You're bringing all this kind of information together as such and training system through actually people using it.
So that's the kind of data availability is the first big challenge to overcome. And we were fortunate that we were, in our very early days, awarded a place on a technology accelerator program run by the Land Registry and Ordnance Survey, two of the big important data providers in this space. And that's called Geovation. So what that meant is that we got access to their data. And that, of course, then from there start to expand out to other sources of data about properties, such as local authority data as well. And there are challenges in terms of the availability of data that a machine can read, if you like. So part of what we're doing in Orbital Witness is just taking on the mantle of that challenge. So pulling data from Land Registry, local authorities, putting it in a machine readable form, and then applying that trained layer over the top to work out, I've got lots of, if you like, dumb information about a property, but how can I synthesize that down to what's relevant on a given transaction?
Interesting.
And where we see this really bites is it kind of separates out. You may sort of relate to this, Neil. There's two things in the world. There's information and there's due diligence. And you need due diligence to be your final answer, your detailed analysis, and the thing that you can rely upon, whether you're a transacting party or a lender. But what we've seen is actually there's this real gap, right? If you are investing in property or you're a property developer, what you also want is just good information up front. And if you like our kind of aha moment, to the extent that every startup has, we probably had several. Aha moments. I think I'll probably have another aha moment this afternoon at some point. Was lawyers kept. The lawyers that we saw early on when we were doing our kind of early legal tech incubation programs that I can touch on a bit later, kept getting asked for this quick red flag review. And that intrinsically that makes sense. The client wants to know, the end user of the information wants to know, I'm about to set out on a transaction that's going to cost me time and money, particularly I think if I'm a big investment fund or a property developer. Is there anything I should know about right now? I can wait for my due diligence that's going to come at the end, but I want to know if there's any major risks. So it seems like a reasonable ask. Of course, from the lawyer's perspective, that's really tricky because you're asking for the headlines without the investigative, without the kind of the willingness to wait for or pay for the investigative journalism. So that's what we saw. Oh, well, actually, what if we could just surface a lot of this information up front and give it straight to the transacting parties in a kind of risk profile for an intended transaction? That was our life bulb.
That makes perfect sense, and I can speak to this pretty well. The number of times I've been asked for, give me the sort of red flag issues, as you said, I mean, that's a really hard question to answer because you have to really understand who the person is that's asking that question. And sometimes that isn't always clear. If you're a developer, you might think a red flag is a restrictive covenant against development. Whereas if you're just going to occupy something, you might not care about a restrictive covenant against development. So there are different needs. And I think I said to you before, but developer may not be interested in the past planning usage because they're going to change what's there anyway. So it's horses for courses in that context, isn't it? But I can certainly appreciate that having that information up front enables people to make better decisions, frankly.
So that's the relevance of machine learning in this context, is being able to say, to train. You can't just take all the data about a property and say, right, what risk profile does this property have in isolation? The relevance of machine learning there is to be able to learn for a given transaction, for a given intended use, what are the issues? I mean, broadly you split that down into intended use, issues that could impact intended use, valuation or liquidity of the property.
That makes sense.
Another area where this really comes into its own is thinking about portfolios. So if you are a lender or an investor, there is just no way in the world that you can diligence large numbers of properties that really make sense in terms of time and cost. So consequently, at the moment, what happens is that law firms do their sampling exercise. They take, and we've seen as little as 5% of a portfolio that gets a proper look in. While the rest is just assumed to be a representative cross section. That strikes us as crazy. I mean, we should be able to get a risk profile across huge portfolios and be able to focus then our attention on the riskier assets, divide those portfolios up. Even speaking to the chairman of a building society in the last couple of weeks, they need to go and raise funds for their mortgage lending activities. And to do that, they have to understand their exposure across their entire loan book. And they can look at the borrowers, but they can't really look at the assets in any meaningful way. And that's what we're looking to solve.
Presumably they're digging out through some old certificates of title, or reports on title for somewhere, which is just not accessible.
You would like to think that. I asked the same individual, do you keep or look at the certificates of title when you receive them? The answer was no. Most of the time we don't even get them.
That's not surprising.
So I guess what you say, previously people have only looked at sort of 5% of the portfolios because the information just hasn't been available to them in an easily accessible form.
It's just the man hours that we need to go into. So even if the information is all there,
just doing it manually
relative to the total value of the transaction, the concept of getting individuals, be they lawyers or otherwise, to trawl through all that information is just disproportionate. So,
well, I mean, the world is full of probably relatively smallish time investors who, the states will be the same, I'm sure, where over the years they've built up a nice portfolio of residential houses or something, and they might have 20, 30, 50 houses, none of which individually are worth an awful lot of money, but collectively they are worth a lot. So how do you divide that? Do you, as you say, you just choose a sample, or if there's the odd £1 million one in there and most of them are knocking around the 300,000, you just pick the £1 million ones? It's not easy. But as you say, the man hours required to go through all that and report on it, it's disproportionate to the level of the loan in some respects if you're talking about financing.
Well, this gets really exciting as well, is if you can risk score like that for property, you can think about secondary markets as well in a much more meaningful way. So that, obviously maybe at the moment the market for CMBS is really small. I'm sorry, we're skewing off of the legal tech topic, but the market for CMBS might be quite small. But we can imagine if at the point at which there's a downturn coming, then there's going to be more non-performing loan portfoligoing being sold, traded, and really with a very little understanding as currently is of the underlying assets. That's kind of where we're going, where we fit into.
I think you just stumbled across the potential salvation, but 10 years too late for us. We could have solved this whole derivatives issue a long time ago, couldn't we? Had we had the idea up front.
But the point was back then, like the availability of the data and the technology that you needed, maybe it wasn't quite mature enough.
Well, I mean, let's bring that back then to how you got going with Orbital Witness then and things like that. You spoke about having that the idea, which is not actually how things have panned out. And you've talked about being involved in incubators and things like that. How important were those incubators and getting involved in those programs? How important were they in helping you shape what Orbital Witness has become?
I'd like to know as well as you can say how you got into those in the first place. How did you sell your idea to them?
Great questions. So I'll just clarify that we've been involved in 2 programs in our early days. Actually 3 programs. So no less than 3 incubators. Incubators are somewhat of a rite of passage for a very early stage startup that we were back then. Those 3 are a LegalTech incubation program run by Michel Andrea called MDR Lab. And I'll touch more on that. That was immediately followed up by the one that I previously mentioned, so Geovation, the Land Registries and the Ordnance Surveys Technology Accelerator program. We were also in a program run by the European Space Agency in the really early days that provided us some much needed funding. So focusing on those first 2, we applied effectively. We took the original idea that I mentioned, the one that we relatively quickly jettisoned, and we set up the company in order to apply to MDR Lab. So that program was 10 weeks of us day in, day out, based in Michigan's offices, based in their real estate team. And I'm sure they took us on as a kind of, when we were in the wild card category, 2 guys, no product.
Right.
But they were involved in space.
It sounded pretty cool. Yeah, maybe it sounded cool, but I think we got to know them. I think they took a punt on us and said, "All right, well, what's the worst they can do? Let's see what they can do."
Yeah.
And over this 10-week period, what we really learnt about was kind of real estate due diligence and understanding property risk, and this gap that existed for being able to furnish like really good, useful information at the start of a deal, rather than after offer terms have gone in and that DD process is carried out. So I mean, if you like, these programs are, to answer your question around how important are they, essential. Without that program, you don't get a deep understanding of the problem. Lots of other benefits in terms of being able to spend time with lawyers, spend time with the end users, the clients in this instance, get mentorship and guidance. It did an awful lot. Land registry programs similarly. It was access to data, access to people understood that data. A little bit of funding in that instance when you're bootstrapping to hire 1 or 2 developers to build an MVP. And then with the MDR lab, we went away. It was probably by the time the lab finished to when we came back to Michigan to run our first ever pilot. That was with 20 lawyers in their team. That was also crucial. That was our first proof point with a basic product, that we had something that had some fit.
I mean, when you started that MDR labs and stuff, did you actually have a product at that point, or did you have the idea at that point?
We had an idea that was probably 2 weeks old.
Okay.
2 weeks old, and a few discussions with some lawyers working in local firms to where we were working, which was near Oxford at the time, in the space centre, in the Space Research Centre.
Were you still in your sort of earlier career then at that stage? You'd had the idea and you put the company together and you were pitching an idea which was 2 weeks old. Were you still working on something else and then thought, right, we've now been approved, we're head into this?
Oh no, I mean we were working. We had. I think, it's hard to cast my mind back now, but when this lab was the first cohort of MDR labs, it was 2017, spring of, we were both, Will and myself, full-time employed in other jobs. So we were doing this very much in the margins, and what we did was increasingly cut down our employment as we took more and more risk, and decided to build this thing. Got a little bit of money, raised a small crowdfunding campaign, and as soon as we basically had a product in pilot, and that pilot was a huge success. Fast forward now, more than a year on, and we rolled out across a number of real estate departments. Michigan was an anchor customer, but obviously you mentioned Denton's and so many other law firms. It's now becoming, we're now getting to the point where it's becoming ubiquitous, which is fantastic. And we're now looking at these other customer segments outside of law firms, which are the end users, ultimately the end beneficiaries of the risk profiles. Okay,
that's interesting, because on your website, I think it's very clear you're working with a number of law firms. You're also working, and I think, correct me on the minutiae, but you've got Jones Lang LaSalle have helped you raise a bigger round of fund more recently, so that they're on the sort of estate management to surveyor side. So presumably another market for you there as well.
Yeah, so we raised what we call a pre-seed round of investment back in sort of very beginning of last year, and that was at the point where we had a few anchor customers. Those were a few law firms and one locked-in companies who are the big broker of legal indemnity or title insurance. It's a fascinating space. You must get into it if you're not a property lawyer. But it's very much also focused on risk in property transactions. And kind of Will and I looked at one another and went, "Oh, this is it looks like it's actually going to go somewhere." But we need to get. We need to scale this up. We need to get capital into the business. And so that's where we went to raise our first proper round of investment. We did that it was led by, on the one hand, kind of Seed Camp, who are Europe's kind of front-running, very early stage tech investor. They invested in Revolut, TransferWise, UiPath, some incredible successes. And then JLL have a venture fund that's kind of separate from JLL itself. Okay. It's called the Spark Fund, so a big Silicon Valley fund. And of course, they have Orbital Witness for their own use, but they see the value of it in terms of what they do as agents. So being able to understand property risk when they're going out to their clients as well. Yeah. So they very much invested in, if you like, the vision of Orbital Witness, into universal risk rating for property. Yeah.
And do you feel that being involved in the Mishcon labs and things like that, and sort of the Ordnance Survey things, do you feel that opened the doors easier for you to then go outside of that and say, actually, we're here, we've got a valid product and things, and have people take you more seriously at that point?
Yeah, categorically, yes. I mean, it's one thing leads to another. So that if that lab leads to your first pilot, which is a success, which then leads to your first couple of sales outside of outside of Mishcon, so you can prove that you're starting to get some product market fit in one vertical. In this case, law firms. That's a really great proof point then to investors. Now we've got customers in retail, like Marks and Spencer's, we've got property developers, we've got insurance underwriters. So we're starting to show what we've been saying from the beginning, that instant understanding of legal risk is applicable. Yeah. Really, it's broad church. Yeah. So
it's difficult to identify sectors that you haven't tapped into. Maybe banking, another one. You must have some banks knocking at your door for.
Well, we're definitely speaking to providers of real estate finance and investors at the moment. That's a really big opportunity, as we see. They've got to deal with such large volumes and often at speed. Yeah. That this would be incredibly useful for them.
Yeah. So what about beyond? What's in the pipeline then? This is all UK based, presumably. Is there an international aspect to this, hopefully?
I mean, what we foresee is a universal risk rating for the property. Now, we accept there's going to be big differences jurisdiction to jurisdiction. When we start thinking about this, really excited about this, we look at kind of commonality. So you might look at systems where there is a very digitized land registration system and that's digitized, or ones that have a kind of similarities to the common law system. It's always very early days to start making meaningful inroads into that. So, but yeah, absolutely. Our vision is that we have something that overseas investors can understand their risk rating, whether they're investing in the UK, in Europe or elsewhere.
Yeah. And I guess you then, as you broaden out your reach, then if you're looking for to move more international, you hit those similar problems that you hit initially here, as well, of getting access to the data, and is that data in a format that you can actually use and things like that. You have to go and discover all that again. So I guess it's not an easy process, but
and it's one that a lot of prop tech, if you like, platforms are grappling with at the moment as they try to go overseas. They go, we've got a model here that works. Yeah. Like, how can we take this and lift this model and apply it to a system where maybe the rules of the game are a bit different, the data is a bit different. We are in that way in quite actually a fortunate position, in that a lot of our core customer base amongst law firms are international. And that we see as a very good opportunity to find routes into other markets. And then there are just obvious opportunities. You take in the US, for example, title insurance there. Where they don't have a guaranteed land registration system as we do here. That's a $15 billion market annually. Massive compared to the title insurance market in the UK. So that's obviously a very nice opportunity. And then there are nations like India, where there's an emergent land registration system. They're building it now. Yeah. So
if you can get in at that stage and help shape how that comes together as well.
So we've got really big ambitions that go beyond these borders. Yeah.
And I guess that's what you want, not only the ambition to use what's there at the moment, but also to help shape how the industry goes forward, to like you say, build something that's a universal risk information and stuff that doesn't matter what region you're in, doesn't matter what country, it's understood as a global thing, and to try and help shape that kind of thing is a really exciting thing to get involved with. And
precisely, I mean, it's the world's most valuable asset class still, property. And you just have to look at some of the reports that come out of CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield, Oxford Business School published a very interesting report recently, the Society Business School, but focused on UK property. And going back to your point, Neil, the problem is the same, is that information isn't understood well, transactions are complex and slow. You should be able to, if not instantly, very, very quickly transact on property, and that means being able to get an upfront view of risk.
It's interesting. I mean, going back to the analogy earlier of stock market being being a different asset class to property. I mean, I often thought that within property, people will find it much more difficult to invest unless they're going through a REIT or something like that, where they can buy a bit of a company that owns properties. It's much more difficult to have ownership of a property as an individual unless you're using somebody else's money generally. So I'm really interested to see, and I don't know whether you've had any discussions with Land Registry, but they're talking now about blockchain facilities and stuff like that, aren't they? Where theoretically, I suppose you could carve up ownership, or at least the whole ownership structure will look a bit different.
Yeah, no, these are very forward-thinking, exciting initiatives from the Land Registry. So the concept of owning bits of property through blockchain, or indeed, I mean, I think already is that you can invest in funds that themselves invest in numbers of different number of properties, and in that guise have a kind of small ownership stake in the property, albeit that's really in the fund itself. So that's really exciting. And then again, to do that, you would want to understand what issues potentially impact the value or liquidity of that property.
It's just thinking, this is thinking off the cuff actually, the ownership of property as an individual, if you were to go and buy someone like Hammerson or Land Securities or British Land or something, you're acquiring shares in that company, and that's one set. For me as an investor, that would be one set of due diligence, but your full due diligence would be looking at what they own, whereas that's probably where you guys could come in. And I don't know whether you're thinking about this yet, but ownership of the properties that they've got, looking at the title register and maybe the search information, the planning history and so on, but also the income producing part of that, the leases that are maybe registered at the Land Registry, and what those leases say, that could all be factored into your risk profile too.
Depending on your transaction type. So if your transaction type is corporate M&A, as you're saying, then maybe you'll focus much less on things like the development constraints of a property. You'll focus much more on, as you say, the income stream and security. So there your just analysis is more focused on what's on the occupational leases.
It's fascinating.
It's interesting. And so within the sort of, I mean, you're now part of this LegalTech startup scene and things like that seems to be booming at the moment, especially in the UK anyway. How do you see has that changed since you started? Do you feel there's support for that LegalTech startup industry, and importantly, are firms and stuff receptive to having a startup come in? We often look at legal firms as a bit stuck in their ways, a bit fuddy-duddy, apprehensive about getting involved with new technology. Has that been an issue for you as a legal tech startup, or do you feel that the market is beginning to accept startups and that kind of that legal tech scene and stuff a bit more?
So I think in terms of where I see things are today, there's a couple of good leading indicators. One is the amount of capital that's available for legal tech. So, obviously, legal tech is pretty hot right now. We've had some, seeing some bigger Series A and Series B venture rounds going in.
There seems to be a lot of new incubators and accelerators.
Loads of incubators and accelerators being set up, absolutely. A couple of acquisitions, the acquisition of IQ, I think is a good example. The acquisition of Leviton being another. So that's a really, really good sign. Maybe that will also kind of play out in some consolidation as well in due time. And then to answer your question, Peter, on the law firm side, I think broadly hopefully this is also just a function of the product that we built. Law firms are incredibly receptive to like seeing what's out there as a minimum, and understanding and getting to know innovation. I think there's still some challenges, which is how does a big law firm work with a startup? That bit is still not solved, and I'm excited by things like Rain & Court and building an application space. To give you one example, there's a lot of repetition when you go through the procurement processes with different law firms. You're fundamentally doing exactly the same thing, and there's no sense in which it doesn't appear to be a view that they've satisfied the requirement of 15 of our peer group. That should therefore be enough for us.
We'll do our own check on it as well.
Exactly. So I get that, but I think that's why I'm excited to see things like kind of app stores, and that perhaps can kind of bring some standardization to that process emerging. I think there's always going to be a long tail in any industry. There's the classic kind of crossing the chasm thing. There's going to be the early adopters, and I think it's a really exciting time to be in legal tech in terms of.
I mean, we've seen from going to the Legal Geek conference and things like that. From when we first went, when it was in a single room, it wasn't. It was busy, but it wasn't a huge event. To see the size and scale of that event now, and the fact that they've moved that over to the US as well, shows that there's so many, law firms and the startups are cotton on to this is something we want to get involved with now.
What I also think is it's an interesting juncture is, I think it's fair to say that at the beginning, legal tech as such was to some degree a marketing exercise for the law firms, or it was a great way of responding to pressure that was being put on them by their clients.
They can say they're now tech savvy because they bought a legal tech solution, or
they've got something to point to in a client pitch. That was how it was, and now I think there's actually like visible, tangible successes coming out of legal tech. Examples of transactions where huge amounts of time has been saved, or they're being able to provide a better, faster output for a client. The trick now for law firms is going to be to understand how to monetize that with their client base. That's, I think, is the challenge now. So you've got stuff that's really successful. Maybe there's another challenge associated with there are so many options out there. Where do you turn? And I think it's incumbent upon the legal tech community to help educate their own client base and say, this is. Help them understand what's out there as well. Make choices, and how do you work with a startup and all of this stuff. So it's not just asking law firms to be kind of to react to that. It's very much something that we have to push as well.
That whole monetization point is an interesting one. I don't think they've necessarily seen that as an opportunity before. I think probably most firms have probably seen technology as a means to greater efficiencies, which might be a means to greater profit, or whether it's greater profit margin or reduced cost and therefore more access to more work, I don't know, but it could be either. But actually, there are some firms that are now using the technology to enable their clients to do more without actually involving the law firms themselves. And document automation is a classic example of that, where they say, here's a portal for you to go in, use our tools, and they're actually somebody else's tools that they've bought, but they've tailored them to that customer and that client, and it enables those clients to do a lot of things without actually talking to the lawyer, and yet the law firms still make money out of it because they've enabled the client to do something. So it's great for them because it's just a cash cow as far as I can tell. So there's opportunities there. Do you work with other startups, other tech ventures? Do you see any collaboration going on? That's one of the big things that we've talked about before is the market collaborative enough? We have our views on that. Do you have any thoughts?
Yes, we have. So how do we collaborate? This is an interesting question to ask. So obviously we have a quite a deep network through these incubation programs of startups, and in a way that it's a bit of a soft answer to this, but the biggest collaboration that you do is just get together from time to time and talk through some of the issues that you face as founders, whether it's to do with raising investment, whether it's to do with issues you have with getting to market, these sorts of things, and that can be incredibly helpful. So that's a kind of softer side of collaboration. But we do that all the time. More kind of more formal things like JVs and partnerships, and I find, at least from our experience, less common. We have been speaking to some other tech startups that are in the kind of property intelligence, looking at other areas of property risk, so like things like flood risk and environmental risk, to see if there's future opportunities to work together, because ultimately we want to provide a kind of cohesive and complete risk profile for a property.
Absolutely.
But at this stage, those have been kind of good discussions when they further.
That's interesting. I mean, so some of the key partners for you will be, you've mentioned land registry, local authorities as well, but water and drainage people, coal authority, flood risk assessors, environment agency, all those people. A lot of them will be part of the Geo 6 or 7 or whatever the number is now, presumably. But do you have links in with all of those? Are you collaborating with everybody there?
Yeah, we got a pretty good links into the kind of core data providers.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. Well, is there any shout outs you want to give to anybody before we finish? Any particular sort of message? You mentioned some of the incubators that you've been with. Those people were obviously instrumental in helping you get to where you are now. Is there anybody else you want to mention before we conclude?
Or anyone you want to say, if you're starting out as a legal tech firm, these are the people to go and talk to, these are the things to go to, the events to see, and things like that.
Definitely. So I think you'd be mad not to go to Legal Geek. Get in touch with Jimmy at Legal Geek, go to that event. It's a great way to immediately get a good feel for the wider legal tech community. Obviously, having been a child of MDR Lab and Geovation, if you're in the kind of prop tech legal tech space, get in touch with Alex Rottersley, who heads up Geovation. MDR Lab is a great legal tech startup. There are other incubators that are run out there, but we had a fantastic experience in that. So I think those are three. If I'm just giving shout outs, like immensely proud of my team who are slogging it away at the moment. We've got
upstairs, right?
Lots going on. Upstairs. Upstairs, they do a fantastic job, and it's their progress that's caused us to it's their work that's caused us to progress as quickly as we have, and be raising more funding this year, and they put us in a great place. So my main shout out would be to them.
I like it. That's really that's very good. I commend you for it. That's good.
And it's a really interesting story to hear you come from something like space agency. Have an idea for something that didn't quite work out into where you are now as well is an interesting trail of how the path is winding for a lot of startups. It's not a straight line to your goal, really.
It would be very disingenuous for me to say I saw this coming.
Fantastic.
Thank you for that.
Well, thank you both very much for inviting me on the programme.
And it's good to have you as our first sort of legal tech people to talk to. I think it's really good. Thank you for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Bye.